Alright guys, last video I talked to you about the most disappointing hitters in the league this season at every position. Here I'm going to talk about the most disappointing pitchers in the league in the 2025 MLB season. I have 7 starters here and 2 relievers who were all expected to be really good, especially for us in fantasy baseball purposes, and wound up just completely falling apart. Starting off with Dylan Cease on the San Diego Padres. Heading into the year, this was a borderline top 10 pitcher in fantasy baseball. Even though he'd come off 2 years where one was really bad, but then last year, 2024, was really good. We always knew there was this Jekyll and Hyde sense with Cease, but now this year he was the bad version again, where he had the 10th highest ERA of all qualified pitchers in all of baseball. It always kind of felt like he was going to get over that hump because there were a lot of times this season where the strikeouts came back in droves and he was able to take that walk rate and push it down a little bit. But as you kept moving through the season, the blow-ups kept coming, the 4 innings, 4 earned run outings were present the whole time, and this is just kind of a good reminder for us that when you have 2 pitchers like Cease and the command of one of those pitches, for Cease sometimes both of those pitches can kind of wax and wane, you can go through these really long stretches of ineffectiveness. And that's kind of who Cease is, as mostly just a fastball slider guy. He has had success at times in the past with the knuckle curve, but it's never been a very successful or consistent pitch for him. And early this season, he tried to work on a new changeup, another thing that never really just came to fruition. He still just has 2 pitches. He's never really been able to wrangle a third one, and the command has never actually taken a real step forward. So this is definitely just who he is at this point. I think I'll be back in on Cease at a lower price next season in drafts, but at the same time, you have to understand that these inconsistencies will always be there for him. Next up, we have Roki Sasaki and the Dodgers. I think he might have been the most disappointing player in fantasy baseball in general because the hype was kind of unreal from his signing last offseason, throwing 100 miles an hour, getting the start for the Dodgers in the second game of the season, back in his home country of Japan, but it all kind of fizzled very quickly. I never understood the draft cost, the fact that he was a top 25, top 30 pitcher across the board. Didn't really make any sense to me. The fastball didn't get swings and misses. The shape wasn't very good, and it's been losing velocity for a few years. And besides the splitter, which is still objectively one of the best pitchers in all of baseball, he didn't really have another secondary option. All of those things came to a head very quickly. He had a bad April, he had a bad May, then he was shut down basically through the end of the season. I still love the future of Roki Sasaki and think it's amazing that he's gotten himself put back together through the later months of summer, August, September, to get back in the Dodgers bullpen. Still bullish on Sasaki going forward, but in this video, we are looking back, and if we're looking back, he's one of the most disappointing players in fantasy baseball. Then we have Spencer Strider on the Braves. Just what happened to this guy this year? We thought that Spencer Strider coming back still between like May and June, that you were going to be able to draft him in the middle rounds, stash him on your IL spot in the bottom of your roster, and then once he was healthy, you got a bona fide ace. He came back on schedule. That part happened as planned. When he came back, he was nowhere close to an ace. He had a 4.45 ERA when you were stashing him on your roster, and with that, his fastball, which used to kind of just be his bread and butter, a really explosive, high-velocity fastball that would live in the top of the zone and get swings and misses, got absolutely tattooed by opposing hitters. It had a 472 slugging percentage against and only a 15% whiff rate. When Strider was at his best a few years ago, that pitch had a 30% whiff rate, nearly twice as many swings and misses compared to, again, when he was at his best in 2023. He talked a lot during the second half of the season about he knows what he has to do to get himself back on track, but those were adjustments that wouldn't be able to come until the offseason. And I do tend to believe Spencer Strider, he's kind of maniacal about the way he pitches, his preparation, the way he takes care of himself, his body, and his pitches themselves. So I do think that maybe he does know what kind of drills to do, what kind of training he has to do to get that fastball shape and velocity back to the spot it used to be so he can get back to missing bats at the top of the zone. But it does seem like after his second very serious arm procedure, he's just not going to be that same explosive guy we saw at the beginning of his career. So again, in spring training this year, when you're going to your next drafts, look for Strider's fastball velocity, looks for his induced vertical break, but also look to see if he has more control, more consistency of a curveball and changeup, because those will be the things that probably dictate the next stage of Strider's career. Next up, we have my prodigal son, still one of my favorite pitchers in the league, but was incredibly disappointing last season, Bryce Miller on the Mariners. Just every single thing that he did really well in 2024 totally fell apart in 2025. I love the adjustments, the pitchability, the way he got more confident, more command, and more consistency on his secondary stuff as that 2024 season went on. By the end of it, looked like he was a guy that deserved down ballot Cy Young votes. Coming into this season, looked like a guy that should have been considered for the Cy Young, again, before the season began. But as we got into this season, all of a sudden the fastball velocity wasn't there, and the feel for all of those secondary pitches that we watched him improve upon the season before were gone. The knuckle curve, which was my favorite thing that he did in 2024, developing it midseason, becoming a weapon for him by the end of the year against left-handed batters. It got hit much harder. It had a whole different movement profile with much more drop on it, coming in a bit slower, and in turn to miss fewer bats. It became much less of the spike curveball that he utilized 2024, more of a traditional curveball movement profile. And I don't really know if that was an adjustment that was made voluntarily or involuntary for Miller, if it was just something he couldn't really wrangle. And again, everything else kind of fell apart around that as well. His strikeout rate fell well below league average. His walk rate rose a ton. It seemed like he was kind of scared to challenge hitters in the zone, which is one of his trademarks during his first 2 years in the league. And I do know he got hurt. He pitched through bone spurs in his elbow for the entire season, but we just can't excuse a 5.7 ERA over 90 innings pitched for someone that was expected to be and drafted as a top 20 starter in the league. Next up, we have Aaron Nola, who did miss a good chunk of this season due to injury, but still had an ERA over 6 in only 94 innings pitched, which is terrible. He was always kind of known, and I think maybe even still is. We'll see how these playoffs go and heading into next season, but as this kind of just reliable, steady, but boring starter that you could take as your SP3, SP4 in the middle rounds of your draft, and just kind of set and forget, not worry about Nola. That did not happen this year because he got absolutely pelted from the get-go, then missed tons of time with an ankle injury that turned into a rib injury, and then he got pelted again when he came back, except for like a few good starts toward the end of the season. And the scary thing about Nola is that every single year, he would always kind of start the season around 90 and a half, 91-ish, 91 and a half miles per hour, and then through April and the first part of May, he'd work back up and get to the 92, 93 range where he's been successful for a few seasons. But this year, he started out in the low 90, like low 90, and sometimes he would even squeak over to like 89.8, 89.9. That's a really bad place for him to start. If that's the place where he's going to start moving forward, I don't know how successful Aaron Nola can be in this league, which is a crazy thing to say about one of the most successful pitchers in the entire league over the last decade, but he really needs to just find a way to get that velocity back to a spot where it's over 91, 292. You have to be there to be a successful pitcher in this league. Even this year when Nola was just throwing knuckle curve after knuckle curve, using that as more of his primary pitch, it still wasn't enough to be effective when every time he threw that fastball and even the sinker, they got crushed. Next up, we have Bailey Ober, who'd been such a steady pitcher for the last few years. I think heading into this season, Bailey Ober might have been one of the most underrated pitchers in all of baseball. From 2022 to 2024, only 4 qualified pitchers had a lower whip than Ober, and those 4 were Tarek Skubal, Zach Wheeler, Gerrit Cole, and Max Scherzer. That's it. For 3 full complete seasons, Bailey Ober had the 5th lowest whip in all of baseball. But heading into this year, the whiffs just left him. His changeup was a 40% whiff pitch in 2024 that fell to under 30% this past season. With that pitch going from an elite offering, it's just a good one, and the rest of Ober's repertoire just kind of being okay, passable, and fine with a fastball in the low 90s and a slider that was just kind of sharp, had a little bit of bite on it, but was never considered anything close to an elite pitch, you lose the kind of foundation for the whole thing. Again, when the changeup goes from something that is something we can rely on, a true out pitch, to something that is just totally fine. And as that was happening, his velocity was falling. He was a guy that kind of lived in that 92 and 93 range. He fell more to the 90 and 91 range, which you will not be effective with in Major League Baseball. I know he dealt with the hip issue, but when he came back from the hip issue in the last month and a half, 2 months of the season, still wasn't really that good. A little bit better in the first half, but still not really that good. So some concerns for Ober moving forward, but just looking at this year, 2025, easily one of the most disappointing pitchers in the whole league. Now, the last starting pitcher on this list is Tanner Bybee on the Guardians. He was considered just one of these reliable guys who was steady and improving as a young pitcher over the last few years. Drafted as a top 100 guy, top 20-ish pitcher, it was kind of the consensus feeling that Bybee was someone you can just kind of set your watch to, but he kind of just sucked. He did pitch the whole season. We give him credit for that, but in that, he had a 4.24 ERA, and his strikeout rate fell well below league average. That's just not the recipe for a guy that you're going to be counting on consistently in your lineups week in and week out. Also, as that happened, Bybee's cutter, which was always his out pitch, it kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. I think that as he developed his sweeper, which wound up being a decent pitch for him, just the movement on that, the grip on that, whatever had happened, it screwed up something with his cutter. He wasn't able to get the same consistency in movement with that pitch, wasn't able to get the same consistency in location with that pitch, and as that happened, it kind of just left the rest of his repertoire out to dry, because that was the out pitch. Someone just talked about Ober with that changeup. When the rest of your repertoire is kind of okay, and that was the thing with Bybee, again, bringing in the sweeper helped, but he doesn't really have a lights-out fastball. Sits in the mid-90s without a good shape, doesn't miss tons of bats. He would have very good starts this year when that fastball velocity would tick over 96, over 97 miles per hour. But he was unable to sustain that consistently. So it did come back to that cutter. being the primary pitch for him, being the out pitch. The inconsistencies of that pitch allowed it to be hit much harder. As it was hit much harder, he had to go to other pitches. He struggled to get hitters out. It was kind of just a snake that ate its own tail situation. All that being said, though, through September, Bybee had a very good month, and as he did that, he found that cutter. It once again became his primary pitch in September alone. It seems like he did rediscover something. He had a good start in the wild card round against the Detroit Tigers, so maybe Bybee will find something and be a value next year. But looking back to this season, really bad. One of the most disappointing pitchers in the league. And now 2 relievers to close us out. Easily the 2 most disappointing relievers in the league, coincidentally, were oftentimes the 2 top relievers drafted in fantasy baseball. The first one, Emmanuel Clase A, sponsored by DraftKings. Kidding. Bad joke, don't mean that. But even when Clase A was on the mound, he had a poor April, allowed a lot of contact. It is a good word of caution to avoid just the top of relievers in general. But also, if the top relievers aren't striking guys out, not really a good road to go down. With that, Devin Williams. The stuff did kind of snap back by the end of the season, but there was still some inconsistencies of his command. Another guy without a wipeout fastball. It really just comes back to that airbender with Devin Williams, but as just a 2-pitch guy, even as a reliever, with a fastball that doesn't really get above 95, 96 miles per hour, it leaves you susceptible. And moving to a new team, the bright lights of New York compared to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it seemed to all kind of jumble up inside Devin Williams' head. And I don't know, depending on where he winds up in free agency this season, if he's even a closer next year. I think he might be. If he is, I think I'll be buying back in at a lower price. But for this year, these 2 guys, often the top 2 closers off the board in fantasy baseball, massive, incredible, huge disappointments. A good lesson to not shop at that top tier of closers, really, ever, if you can avoid it. But that's it. These were the most disappointing pitchers in fantasy baseball this season. Again, thank you guys for coming back and supporting the channel. If you guys missed it, the last video, most disappointing hitters in fantasy baseball, check that one out. Thank you so much. Next 2 videos that'll be coming out will be the best and most surprising hitters and pitchers in the league. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you next time.